All right. I think we're live, Steve. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry for confusion for anyone that's joining or that's been hanging out waiting for us. We had some technical issues on our end. Looks like we got them resolved. Welcome. Focus for the session today is cost cutting without compromises, replacing Mobius efficiently. My name is Andrew Marsh. I'll do a quick intro of P3. We're a team of specialists dedicated to addressing business complete data, that is legacy archive applications that are no longer actively ingesting content. So we do that by connecting with your legacy systems and streamlining their migration and archival into a low cost, easy to manage platform that doesn't cost $1 million. So let me introduce to our special guest for today, Steve Sorich. Steve's been working in this space in enterprise content management and report management since circa 1990-ish. He's got a huge history of certainly Mobius and IBM Content Manager on Demand. He started out at American Stores working on Mobius, I think in 1990, Steve, right?
Yeah, 1990.
It was called InfoPack back then, right?
Yeah, InfoPack. Yeah, it's been through many different names, I guess, and companies.
Right. Then you did 5 years Arthur Andersen. Then Steve went to work at AT&T circa 1999-ish. Then Discover. And stayed at Discover until almost 2020. That's what I have in my notes here, Steve. So
yeah,
you did Mobius, you've done Documentum, you've done Content Manager on Demand, and another repository for statements, correct?
Yeah. I've done a lot of different ECM support and development, and it's nice to be called a special guest, but all I've basically done was live through a couple of conversions, many conversions, and I actually assisted you guys a couple times years ago with a couple of clients. So happy to
Well, we've
be
been friends
joining
for
you
a long
guys.
time, so thanks for hopping on today.
No problem.
All right, so let's talk about what we're doing today. A platform 3, we tend to be reactive to these kind of market conditions. Companies are constantly retiring their legacy applications because that's our specialty. We tend to get waves, effectively, of applications that are either going end of life or end of service life, or otherwise ending their support for some legacy application. We're also seeing frustrated customers from organizations that have either ended their innovation with a product or platform, they're not keeping up with product patches or updates, and are pressing their customers with expensive maintenance renewals or license renewals and that sort of thing. So you're seeing that as well, Steve, right? Is that I think conversation you and I had several years ago. The reason we were talking about one of your, I don't want to mention any names, but one of your employers was making a move due to one of those considerations I mentioned. Is that right?
True. So yeah, we got a present of a upgrade or a renewal that the management wasn't fond of. So we basically, first migrated off the mainframe, and then we migrated off of Mobius at that point.
Right.
So it was, very costly for us, and they made a decision to go in a different direction. So that's what I had to make happen at that point.
So yeah, you were a consumer of that, one of those challenges I just mentioned. So that really is the focus for today. We're seeing an uptick in activity related specifically to Mobius. We've had customers reaching out to us recently, asking about how quickly, how long it takes, and that sort of thing about how to replace their platform. So for today, we're going to talk more about the how than the why. But before we jump in, let me give you a quick introduction to Mobius for anyone that's listening today that doesn't really know what Mobius is, but is believe it or not. Otherwise, generally fascinated about legacy application archival, if those people actually exist. So Mobius was an innovator like 30 years ago. They were an early player in the content management space. At that time, the space was, I think it was called ERM, or cold, computer output to laser disk. It kind of actually evolved from uh, ERM into cold, or cold into ERM, which subsequently developed into enterprise content management. That's really where the enterprise content management space came from. Back then, mainframes were still prevalent, and distributed applications, distributed systems were toys and fun things, and people weren't running enterprises on them back then, 30 years ago, if you could believe that. So for mainframe enterprise report management, there's a handful of players. Mobius is one of the most innovative, I would say. Over the course of the last couple of decades, unfortunately, Mobius changed hands several times and has gone by multiple names. They were Mobius RDS, Mobius InfoPack, Mobius ViewDirect, ASG Mobius, and I think now they're called Rocket Mobius. So yeah, they've handed that company, or passed that company around, or changed that name several times. So the way these tools work is they allow you to capture and store what would formerly be printed reports electronically. Back then, when you wanted to know how many widgets your company produced last week, you'd print a report. And you'd go look at that data on the report. In fact, people would walk down to the printing center every Monday morning, and they'd go get their stack of reports like they would go get their stack of mail every week. Each one of those reports was called a report version. So you go down every week and get your latest version of your widget sales report from last week. So those ERM customers had hundreds or thousands of reports that were printing on a periodic time frame, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or whatever. And effectively, what Mobius and its peers did was store those documents, or those pieces of content, electronically, allow people to see their section only of that report, and view it online. That was kind of the evolution of Mobius. Excuse me. So if you're working for a large company that was creating phone bills, for example, or power bills, that you had hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of statements, Mobius would store that content electronically and allow you to view it online. That's it. Essentially, the core functionality of an ERM is view your content, view your reports online. So let's talk about some of the characteristics specifically for Mobius. It runs on the mainframe, or certainly they have a distributed environment as well, but the customers that we see mostly reaching out to us are people either retiring a legacy mainframe application or retiring their entire mainframe. And you've got experience with both of those, right, Steve?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's basically the same product that runs on both sides. It's, so if you know one, it's easy to pick up the other, and they both work similarly and do almost the identical same thing on a different platform.
Right. So let's talk about the AFP document specifically, because I know that the formatted reports that are coming off Mobius, again, going back to that phone bill comment I made a minute ago, AFP stands for Advanced Function Presentation, right, Steve?
Yeah. And
so, yeah, go ahead.
It's advanced, all right.
Well, let's take a quick sidebar on AFP. So it's AFP, technically, I had to Google this. It's a system of hardware and software that allows users to create, format, and print information on a variety of platforms and printers. So IBM wrote that framework 40-ish years ago. 2006, they published the architecture as an open standard. And it really, that was really sort of the gold standard for formatted documents back in the day. that also provides the ability to hold indexes for the documents as well. So well-formed AFP was actually a fantastic shortcut to indexing a print stream and managing and storing that content. So why is the AFP used at all, Steve, given there's so many other formats that we can deliver to a printer? I'm going to pop up a slide here that kind of displays that, if I can figure out how to use my tool here for a second.
Well, in my estimation, I think the AFP is used from a print perspective. It drives printers well,
Right.
high-speed printers. I mean, PDF has come a long way, but I did a demo, and this is years ago, so I don't know if things have changed. But we tried to convert our printers to PDF printers because PDF is such a nice format for storage, viewing. And you can view PDF. Trying to view AFP without a custom viewer is, you know, catch as catch can. You're not going to find an AFP viewer outside of the Mobius viewer that will basically render AFP, and it's not a rendering friendly format. When we
Right.
try to convert our printers to PDF, they didn't go as fast, so it slowed down our print operations. So there's good things about AFP, meaning it can drive your enterprise printers very quickly. There are also bad things about managing the resources and um, trying to render the documents in the AFP format.
Yeah, it was also, I mean, at the time, it was also very efficient, right, for storing content.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So back then, disk storage was much more expensive than it is today. So again, large enterprises that were producing hundreds of thousands of pages weekly or monthly needed an efficient way to store that content. So coincidentally, PDF, right, has come a long way in the last several years as well. So our product team recently discovered that PDF next to AFP, it can be actually more efficient. Just an unusual sidebar, and I will correct you. There are some tools that render AFP efficiently, and we
Sure.
have one of them as well.
Well, that's good. I mean,
Yeah.
they're hard to find, honestly.
All right, so AFP sidebar aside, let's get back on the main track here, right? So we're working with legacy ERM systems like Mobius. They're kept around because they're containing large repositories, sometimes with new content coming in. These systems, and since you're also a CMOD expert, this is true for those guys as well. These applications are 20 to 40 years old. They have an industry-wide lack of subject matter expertise for both the content and the platform. They're used to perform extraction from complex data sets, and they provide a handful of features that are rarely used today. Like, for example, securing access to a subset of pages within a document. You don't really see that as a requirement much nowadays.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Base requirements is what we see nowadays, right? Biggest technical challenges that you had, Steve, with your legacy ERM systems. What were they?
What, converting them?
Yeah, what were the biggest when you're doing that conversion, right? What were the four things that you were worried about when you said, "Hey, listen," when your boss said to you, "Listen, we're getting rid of Mobius,
Yeah.
and we're moving to something else."
Oh, I mean, the four at a high level are, how do you get it out of the old repository? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's the first thing you need to extract. You need to put it back in the new repository, and it needs to look the same. So however your users were searching for the documents in the old repository, you should have at least an equivalent. Now, if you can make it better, that's great. But generally, they're already, used to searching by an account number or what have you. So to get it back in, with a searchable content is very important. And then third thing would be how do you address the day for the objects that are still potentially coming into the old repository. If you still
Mhm.
have day forward capture requirements, that's your third
Right.
thing. And then the fourth thing is basically getting your users up to snuff on on the new UI, which can be a daunting task unless it's the UI is familiar enough to your users, meaning it looks like their old UI in some way, meaning either the search
Yeah.
criteria or something is familiar to them, and that will decrease your training requirements if you can put something in front of the users that they're familiar with already.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Obviously it's a low value application if they're looking to archive it, and you don't. The last thing you want to do with a low value application is have to retrain a user community if that's a requirement. Let's
Mm.
let's jump into let's. I want to go through those sequentially, right? How do you get it out? How do you get it in? Addressing day forward requirements and then training. So let's talk about how do you get the data out, and specifically how do we get the data out, right? Um, let's start with the fundamental challenge with getting data out of a Mobius repository in general is right. Moving massive amounts of data is a physics challenge more than anything else. There's things that we can do to address that. For example, we can increase the number of threads, put more resources on it, spend more time or hours in a day on utilizing mainframe resources to extract it. But at the end of the day, you're physically moving bits and bytes off mainframe storage into a distributed platform. So it's lift and shift at its core. Would you agree with that so far, Steve?
Sure. Well, no, but yeah. I mean, what do you use to do that? Are you using Mobius to do that?
Yeah, I mean, whenever possible, we want to try and use Mobius tools to do that. Obviously, they have APIs that they expose, and yeah. So at its core, we use the Mobius tools to identify what's in the repository and what we want to extract, and then we use the Mobius tools to actually pull that content out as if we're pulling it out for a presentation, right?
Gotcha.
I mean, more importantly, we spend a bunch of time during the analysis phase to understand what the user requirements and what their index requirements are, right? If we're looking, for example, at formatted AFP documents, those indexes are maintained frequently inside the AFP file itself, but Mobius also provides the ability to support index information within the Mobius tool as well. So we spend a lot of time with that upfront analysis to understand that we're pulling out the right information and able to provide that user experience that's similar or familiar enough with what they're doing today so they can access it in the future. I've got a diagram here I'm going to pop up that I call the happy path. Let me see, present. Can you see the workflow happy path there, Steve?
Yes.
So, right at its source, if I was going to walk through this in 90 seconds, I would say, right, at the happy path is if we were going to examine a typical scenario, a very, very typical scenario, you've got content coming out of a source system that routes its way through a process. And if there's AFP used, it runs through a tool like ASIF to convert and index that content into the AFP format before it runs to a queue with the printing function services. Would you agree with this so far?
Yeah. I mean, it's the typical happy path, I guess you would say. I guess your challenge is to make sure you got everything right,
Yeah, yeah.
understand what's in the current archive, and then, you know, make sure you identify all the indexing information and move it, right? So, yeah, I agree. It's a good happy path.
Right. So, I mean, if we start with this as our foundation, then we start inquiring and start with that engagement with our customers to understand that happy path or what their happy path looks like, to understand how the documents are being captured, how they're being indexed, and then how they're being delivered out to the report queue. That's where we spend the bulk of our time up front. So it's foundational stuff, right? When you're building a house, you spend a lot more time making sure you've got the right, cement flooring and the stringers and the pillars and all those bits and pieces that make up the foundation of a house. Because once construction begins, it moves a lot more quickly. So we spend a lot of time up front on that foundational step. That's usually several iterations with the customer to understand indexing and that sort of thing. And once we've done that, then we move a lot more quickly through the actual ETL process. So, obviously our team has P3 expertise, Steve.
Yeah.
The easiest way, the easiest way, as we said a second ago, the easiest way to get that content out is we built an ETL process that works with Mobius. Mobius provides consolidated info on the user access requirements. Actual user access is available as well. The user groupings, how users are grouped together, and then also holds details on any retention requirements that are set on that tool as well. So, in my experience, retention in Mobius, certainly legacy Mobius was very basic. Store X number of versions of the reports. For example, a daily report, you might store 365 versions or 365 days of that report.
Yeah, it's days or versions. I mean, they have all kinds of different terms. They use topic indexing to refer to
Yep,
indexes, and
that's right.
recipients to refer to people. And, I mean, they have their own lingo, but it's all in every content management system that I've seen.
Yeah, and so that's a great point, right? Our Archon ETL workflow, it's designed to automate the process of capturing those topic and section indexes. Certainly, any topic and section indexes that are maintained inside Mobius, and also those indexes that are maintained inside that AFP file as well. So that really sums up the how do we get it out. Let's talk quickly about how do we get it back in. Basically, we spend that time up front understanding that flow to get the data out. We make sure we understand your formats. But if you're following along so far, you'll recognize that the careful planning that we do up front is crucial to the load process for how do we get it back in as well. If we're able to capture the reports and the formatting those reports on the extraction phase, the indexing phase, all we have to do is make sure that our software is capable of satisfying those indexing requirements, and two, make sure we can translate source system attributes about access, retention, and disposition into our archival product, which is called Archon Data Store. Quick aside, if we frequently see people still using RACF or ACF2. They're logged in with a green screen to access their Mobius application. We can translate those as well to distributed user IDs. So it's rarely, if ever, I don't know that I've ever seen a customer now that has a mainframe and doesn't have a distributed application environment. So most of the time, when those people are still using those ACF2 RACF user IDs, we translate those as well.
I would think, and just one thing to note here, Andrew, is when you're going through a conversion like this, like I've been in a handful of them already, and what's nice about P3, just as a company, and converting out of another repository into a P3 repository, and I don't know the P3 repositories yet, sorry, maybe soon, but I think the good thing about it is that when you have a company that's converting out of your old repository in, and they own the new repository that you're converting into,
Yeah.
they don't have the ability to walk away after the conversion is complete. And, I've been part of a couple of conversions that we've hired a conversion company to come in and do the ETL, right? And as soon as it's done, they're out the door and you're stuck
Ah,
with whatever it is that they did. And if you have thousands of or millions of objects, you can't open them all to make sure that they're working. So it's nice to have somebody who is still on board after you've converted to make sure that the data that your users are trying to fetch is available. And it's very critical because you can find something years later that wasn't converted correctly and you have no options at that point.
that's good to know, Steve. Actually, we actually had a different customer, a different use case, but they did have, after a couple of years, discovered they had missed some attachment notes or something as part of their ETL process. So that totally rings true for me. Like, we started as a services only organization, so our whole business was built on being very successful with services. Hang on a
And your
second. We
services
had
are
tech.
great. I can
Yeah.
verify that.
So we've been selling this commercial application for about 5 years now. But yeah, no, that's really good information. Good to know. So let me, in the interest of time, since we started late, let me jump forward to day forward capture. Again, really not much to say here in terms of the how. Obviously, day forward capture requirements mean that we have to mimic a process that is currently being used by Mobius today. That usually involves integrating with a scheduling tool or a sweep operation or some sort of start a task. We're at the tail end of a migration right now. Actually, we're working with Control M Process. Actually, I think is the name of the product, to make sure that sweep job includes Platform 3, so that new day forward content is going to be moving into our archive. So, like I said, this is a critical component, but in my opinion, it's probably the least interesting part of a project. That's just sort of plumbing stuff to make sure that any day forward capture happens as designed. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add on to that, Steve, but
No, I mean, it's all good.
okay. So let me jump forward to how we present it. The one thing that constantly impresses me about Archon Data Store is that it's highly configurable, the user interface is. So whether that's basic, simple search and show me the data, or do you want to add formatting to a report, to a basic text report so that it looks like the original W-2 or the original invoice, we can provide enormous flexibility with how that data is presented, including presentment for AFP and PDF and other formats like that.
Can you
So
make
yeah,
it
lots of
with the
experience
Mobius
there.
interface?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let me pop up while you're talking, or while I'm talking here. Let me pop up a quick screenshot of what a basic Mobius UI might look like in the P3 user experience. And then let's talk while we're doing that, right? The importance of addressing user indexing challenges is not to be overlooked, right? I said that it's less frequent that we get people wanting to see subsections or just a few pages of a report, but we do see it, and when we see it, we want to make sure that we can provide that user experience as well. So hopefully you can see my screen. It should be coming any second now.
Yep.
So, right. So if you've got a list of reports, I've got P3001, 02, and 3, and so forth. You can navigate your way into these reports by clicking on one, clicking on a report version, clicking your way down to see a section, whether it's East, Central, West, or a section that makes sense to your user community. And then eventually down into, I'm just showing a text-based report here, but for purposes of just making sure that it's clear, we can identify that report ID and section ID, and we can secure a document so that if a user only has access, I've highlighted this one in green, this user only has access to the central region of this sales report, for example. So again, that it's a critical component for people that still have that requirement. We don't see it that often, but I think it's important. So let's talk about topic indexes briefly. I know CMOD does it a little bit differently, Steve, right?
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Everything is associated with the report data, right? So, I mean, much like in any other, content management, but it's not. I guess it's more tied to the document, whereas the Mobius stuff, you can have any document feeding into a topic, whereas the CMOD is a little bit less flexible in how you index, I guess I would say, and more it stores the indexes better. Let's put it that way. So,
right. All right. So I think we've covered, Steve, most of what we wanted to talk about today, right? How do we capture the data? How do we present the data? Am I missing anything?
Well, I mean, the whole point of this was like, how do you replace it efficiently? So where's the efficiency here? I don't.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So if I was going to break it down, I would say we break it down efficiently into three areas, right? One is we know Mobius, we know the Mobius application. As we said several years ago, back when you were still a contractor and consultant, Steve, we relied on your support and assistance, and we picked up a lot of Mobius knowledge since then. So understanding the Mobius application, I think handling the migration efficiently is another critical point, right? Making sure that we obviously want to spend that time in the setup and the foundational elements, but making sure we optimize that time for the actual extraction process, the physical extraction process once it's started, and then storing that content in a modern platform. So our product, Archon Data Store, it uses serverless architecture, so it spins up resources dynamically, spins up infrastructure dynamically. For example, we do compression, storing content at the object layer instead of in a database layer. All those things add up to efficiencies on the back end that allow us to save money once the content's in and stored in the repository. So let's sum up the conversation today. I know we're over on time a little bit, so I'll be quick. We grew as a professional services organization, platform-free solutions. We focused entirely on helping our customers archive legacy data from old platforms onto stable, secure, compliant, and now modern platforms as well. Our solutions are designed to be affordable. They're designed to help you move your content off legacy platforms, not just Mobius, but any legacy platform, and ideally multiple legacy applications into a single archival platform without costing $1 million. That's this short version of it. Our software is deliverable on premises in your environment. We can deliver it via SaaS, or we can deliver it in your cloud. So lots of flexibility there. And like I said a minute ago, Mobius is a single application. Ideally, you've got dozens or hundreds of apps that are due for retirement, or you've got data that's business complete, then you should be reaching out to us. So let me just close out by saying thanks for volunteering your time today, Steve. It was super valuable. Always great catching up with you.
Sure, you're welcome.
I'm sure you'd love to do a detailed dive in at some point, but maybe we can schedule that for the future. If anyone has questions, challenges, or a Mobius project coming up, please reach out to us. If you've just got questions about this session, we're happy to entertain those as well. And if I'm going to be following a YouTube channel, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Anyway, thanks again, Steve. Thanks for your time, and thanks everybody for joining in.
Thank you. Goodbye.
See ya.